welcome back for another edition of Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Today we're going to examine and break down the upcoming UFC 118 card. Before we get there, let's quickly recap what transpired at UFC 117. I made 5 predictions and finished with a record of 3-2, pushing my overall record to 5-4. For anyone who watched the review, it was pretty evident that Chael Sonnen was only minutes away from picking up the victory over Anderson Silva, but Sonnen got subbed very late in the fight. Regardless of that, I think my overall prediction was fairly accurate with regard to how the fight would play out. Unfortunately, only being partially right does not put money in our pockets, so it's time to move on and see if I can get the job done right at UFC 118. UFC 118 emanating from the home of my Boston Bruins, the TD Garden in Boston, Mass. on Saturday, August 28, 2010. There'll be 5 main card fights, and that I'll be breaking down along with 2 televised undercard fights that I'll also give you predictions for. Our opening fight of the night is in the UFC welterweight division between Nate Diaz, 12-5, and Marcus Davis, 19-6. Both fighters are coming off impressive rebound victories that preceded a period of struggle inside the octagon. Diaz is heading into the fight following a first-round TKO victory over Rory Markham, making a successful jump to the welterweight division. Prior to that jump, Diaz had dropped 3 of his last 4 fights. Nate is well known for his submission skills, and he'll enter the fight with a 6-inch reach advantage, which should help him to stand up against Davis. Diaz's game plan will use the striking to set up a takedown and eventually a submission. Looking at Davis, he also picked up a TKO victory in his last match. Prior to that last win, Davis dropped back-to-back fights, most recently to Ben Saunders, suffering his first knockout defeat of his career, and before that a controversial split decision loss to Dan Hardy. Davis is a former professional boxer with a very refined striking game that has aided him in compiling an impressive MMA record. His boxing skills should give him the edge over Diaz on the feet, and he's only been submitted once in his career back in 2004, which indicates he can defend himself in that situation. Looking at the odds, Marcus Davis is the underdog, paying $2.62, while Nate pays $1.44. Seeing as this is Nate's only his second trip to the welterweight division and it's a step up in competition from his first fight, I think these odds are a little misleading. Diaz's best chance of winning this fight would be to keep it standing and try to outpoint Davis. Unfortunately for Diaz, this strategy plays directly into the former boxer's hands. I think that Davis will use his boxing skills to control Diaz, frustrating Nate. My pick for this fight is Marcus Davis, paying $2.62 to earn a decision victory over Nate Diaz. Our second matchup is in the UFC lightweight division between 2 of the top contenders for the title. Kenny Florian, 13-4, and Gray Maynard, 10-0, are both looking to put themselves in line for a title shot with a win in this fight. Maynard has won 6 consecutive fights by decision, including a win over the current UFC lightweight champion Frankie Edgar. In those victories, Maynard used his superior wrestling skills to control Edgar and Rich Clemente on the mat en route to unanimous decision victories. Following those wins, Maynard showcased his stand-up skills with another decision victory, this time over Jim Miller. After the Miller fight, Maynard ran into 2 very solid strikers in Roger Huerta and Nate Diaz, who both used aggressive stand-up attacks to keep Gray off his rhythm, but Maynard still managed to pick up split decision victories in both fights. In each of the last 2 wins, Maynard's opponent showcased that putting pressure on Gray and keeping the fight standing gave Maynard a whole pile of problems. His opponent, Kenny Florian, has ripped off 8 victories in his last 9 contests with an 11-3 overall record in the UFC. Opposing Maynard's 6 consecutive decision victories is Kenny Florian's claim of finishing fights, which he has backed up by only allowing 1 of his 13 wins to go to decision. Figuring prominently into those 13 wins has been Kenny Florian's use of a rear naked choke, which he has used to secure more than half of his wins. Supporting Ken Flo's solid submission skills has been a ever-improving stand-up attack and some of the nastiest elbows in the game. Florian will enter this fight with a 6-inch reach advantage, which will help keep Maynard on the defensive and keep him at a distance. In his last 2 fights, Florian was able to pick apart power puncher Takanori Gomi, and then in the fight before that, he effectively deflated the aggressive attack of Clay Guida, both leading to the rear naked choke victory. The odds currently have Kenny Florian favored, paying $1.66, while the undefeated Gray Maynard is a slight underdog of $2.10. Looking at what has transpired in each of the last 2 respective fights, Maynard struggled to deal with his opponent's aggressive striking in combination with Florian's stand-up, wearing down opponents, leading to submission victories. It has me leaning in favor of Kenny Florian. Florian's game planning for his fights has been impressive, and I think he will recognize the success that Maynard's last 2 opponents have had. So my pick for this fight is Kenny Florian, paying $1.66 to defeat Gray Maynard. The third fight on this card is fought under the middleweight banner between 12-1 Mario Miranda and 12-2 Damian Maia. Miranda enters the contest with a 1-1 record in the UFC, following his debut against Gerald Harris, but recovering to earn a victory over former middleweight contender David Loazo in his most recent bout. Damian Maia brings a 6-2 record inside the octagon, having earned victories over such notable fighters as Chael Sonnen, Dan Miller, and Nate Quarry. While Maia has dropped 2 of his last 3 fights, those defeats came against top contender Nate Marquardt and UFC middleweight king Anderson Silva. Based on experience alone, Maia boasts a great advantage, having been inside the octagon on 6 more occasions than Miranda, along with having faced a higher caliber opponent. It's not the only thing that's involved in this fight. Damian Maia's unparalleled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills have resulted in 4 submission of the night honors in the UFC, along with a grand total of 8 of his 12 victories coming as a result of submission. Should the fight go to the ground, Maia holds a distinctive advantage there. But looking back at his past few matches, Maia's approach seems to have strayed away from his superior ground skills into more of a striking attack. Going back to his decision victory over Dan Miller, Maia made it quite clear that he desired to keep the fight standing to display that he is much more than a one-dimensional fighter. This concerns me because when a fighter is so proficient in one area of the game, but chooses to ignore those skills in favor of a style that greatly evens the playing field between him and his opponent, the betting odds will not reflect the choice, and instead Maia will remain a sizable favorite based on his superior submission skills, even if he doesn't intend to use them, making him a very risky betting selection. This being said, the odds have yet to be posted for this matchup as a result of being recently added to the card. But I would think that Miranda will be paying between $2.55 and $2.75, while Maia will come in around $1.35 to $1.55. Looking at Miranda's stand-up skills, he has used his striking to stop multiple opponents, including a TKO victory 16 seconds into the first round of a second career fight. So that threat is a very real one that Maia will need to take into consideration. Prediction time. Seeing as that Maia has now gone 3 fights without locking an opponent in submission and has been defeated twice in that stretch, is the perfect opportunity for him to return to what brought him to the dance. I'm not saying that Maia needs this win to avoid being cut from the roster, but a defeat would certainly bring into question his relevance within the division. I think that Maia will enter the fight looking for the takedown and subsequent submission. Simultaneously, Miranda's concern with being taken down and submitted will inhibit his striking skills. So my pick for this matchup is Demian Maia to defeat Mario Miranda. The co-main event of the evening is being touted as a clash between boxing, represented by James Lights Out Toney, the current IBA heavyweight champion, and MMA, represented by Randy the Natural Couture, the multi-time, multi-divisional UFC champion and UFC Hall of Famer. This is Toney's MMA debut, a debut that Toney long chased Dana White for, and a debut that many consider to be a freak show style fight not expected to take place under the UFC banner. Regardless, this fight's going to take place, barring any unforeseen complications, and I'm really looking forward to it. Seeing as this is Toney's debut, he's got no previous MMA background to draw upon, so I'll look at what we do know. James Toney's a world-class boxer. He's got a professional boxing record of 72, 6, and 3, with 44 of those wins coming by knockout. He'll enter this fight with one goal, and that's to keep the fight standing. He needs to use his striking skills to catch Couture and drop him. In no way, shape, or form does Toney want this fight to go anywhere else. With only 9 months of actual MMA training, he will need to rely on what he knows best, and what he knows best is boxing. Should this fight go anywhere else, Lights Out will be an extreme disadvantage, easily exploitable by any experienced MMA fighter, let alone one of the greatest MMA warriors of all time. Randy Couture comes into this fight with a reputation of MMA riding on his shoulders, and I think this will greatly influence his strategy. Couture would not have been able to endure and succeed in the UFC for this long a time period, and especially at the current age of 47, if he prepared for each fight in a manner that best suited his opponent's strengths. Randy has been heard saying in the media that he's not concerned about Toney's striking skills. Regardless of these comments, expect Couture to rely heavily on his Greco-Roman wrestling background for this matchup. Couture enters the fight with a 3-inch reach advantage, which should help him keep out of Toney's striking while still landing a few shots of his own. Toney's never had to deal with being kicked in the body and legs, pushed up against a cage wall, and then having to defend against a takedown, not to mention a brand new world he'll be exposed to once he hits the mat. The boxer can train all he wants in the gym for these scenarios, but there's no substitute for the real thing, and Couture is going to show him the real thing. Looking at the betting odds of the fight, Randy Couture is considered a heavy favorite, paying $1.14, while Toney pays a lofty $5 even. Toney paying $5 seems to be appealing under the concept of a puncher's chance, because he certainly has that. While Randy Couture paying $1.14, the risk-reward, it's definitely an issue. But my expectations of this fight are very simple. If Toney's unable to clip Randy early on, his chances of winning the fight will diminish with every passing second. Early on, I expect Couture to feel out Toney's range, work to push the boxer up against the cage where Toney's striking skills will be nullified and Randy can use his dirty boxing and knees to wear on his opponent. Toney will have never felt the type of pressure up against the wall with no place to go, and that's when it will go from bad to worse. I expect Couture to take Toney down either by dumping him on his head or just simply dragging him down to the mat. From that point, Randy should have no problem using his ground and pound to punish the boxer with little resistance, either pick up a win by stoppage or potentially a submission should the opportunity for a rear naked choke present itself. Probably in the first round, maybe early second. So again, my prediction for the co-main event is Randy Couture to defeat James Lights Out Toney. The main event of the evening will be contested between the former champ, 15-6-1 BJ the Prodigy Penn, and the current UFC lightweight champion, 12-1 Frankie the Answer Edgar. This is a rematch from UFC 112 in which Edgar picked up a controversial 5-round unanimous decision victory over the heavily favored Penn to become the new champ. There were rumors swirling around the first fight that Penn was not 100% healthy entering the title defense, and this contributed to his defeat. More recently, Edgar's camp released information saying that their fighter was also suffering from health issues prior to the bout, trying to counter Penn's claim. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding the last matchup at UFC 118, we're going to establish whether Edgar's win was the real deal or if Penn simply had an off night. The first thing I'm going to look at for this matchup is the betting odds. Despite being champion, Edgar enters as greater than a 3-1 underdog, paying $3.25. Well, the challenger, Penn, pays $1.28. There are two scenarios that I think contribute to these odds. The first, odds makers realize that the majority of the general public tend to place bets on the more well-known fighter, which in this case is Penn. As a result, they move Penn's odds lower so that if he does win, the payout will be less despite the vast majority of people betting on him. Secondly, the fight reminds me of the Scott Smith-Kung Lee rematch. Don't get me wrong, Penn-Edgar 2 is a far better fight with far more talented fighters, but I see three similarities. In the first installment of both fights, there was a significant upset, followed by an immediate rematch with no fights in between for either fighter, and in both fights, the winner of the first contest was still a significant underdog in the second. The reason for this is that the odds makers are hoping to catch the general public in a very simple trap. The bettors will look at the last fight, see that Edgar won, then look at the substantial payout that a win in the second fight will provide, and they will put a whole pile of money down on Edgar. These two trends lead me to believe that the odds makers feel that Penn is going to take the rematch. They have fashioned the odds so that Penn's value needs to be combined with other fights to make any serious money, so they hope the majority of the betting public pick Penn, and if they do, the payout is diminished by his lower odds. Or potentially they don't win at all because someone else in the card loses. Edgar's odds are so high that they're going to attract people dropping a lot of money on a single bet on the champ, or getting really greedy and parlaying with other picks to drive up the overall payout. So again, if Penn wins, like I think they expect, all of the action on Edgar is straight up profit. So the plan for this matchup for the odds makers is to set up a scenario where they profit regardless of what happens to avoid a huge loss. Moving away from the odds to focus on the actual fighters, I felt that BJ really did look himself in the last fight, and Frankie's speed, footwork, and striking skills did just enough to secure the victory. In some people's eyes, but not all, hence the immediate rematch. I think the fight will start off in a similar fashion to the last. Penn will take the center of the octagon, and Edgar will use his footwork, boxing skills, to set the pace, circling Penn, jabbing away at him. The difference will be is how BJ responds to Edgar's attack. If you look at BJ's options, this fight is a must-win. A second consecutive title fight loss to Edgar will put BJ roughly in the same position as he's currently in with regard to the welterweight title, down the ranks of contenders where he will need to string together a series of victories and wait for his turn to face the champion again. With that in mind, BJ will not leave the fight with the judges. I expect that Penn will respond with a more aggressive striking game and not allow Frankie to get off first. I see Penn striking with Edgar again for the first 2 to 3 rounds, with more success this time, and in a similar fashion to the Kenny Florian fight, Penn will pick a spot to begin taking control of the fight and slowly breaking the will of his opponent, potentially spending a great deal of the second half of the fight working over Edgar on the mat. This is not an easy fight to pick. There's a lot of things that said Frankie Edgar could take this fight as well, but I felt there was enough support in favor of BJ Penn winning the fight that even at a low price of $1.28, he was the right choice in this fight. So my prediction for the main event at UFC 118 is BJ Penn to defeat Frankie Edgar to reclaim his lightweight title, probably by submission. As I promised, I also have 2 predictions for the televised undercard fights. In the first matchup, I'll be taking hometown boy Joe Lozon to pick up the win over Gabe Rudiger, probably by submission. In the second fight, Andre Winner will square off with Nick Lentz. I'm going to take Nick Lentz in a little bit of an upset to use his wrestling to pick up the win over Andre Winner. So quickly to summarize my main card picks for UFC 118, I'll be taking Marcus Davis paying $2.62, Kenny Florian paying $1.66, Damian Maia, I'm going to say $1.45, the odds are unknown yet. In the co-main event, Randy Couture paying $1.14 for the win, and BJ Penn paying $1.28 in the main event. With these odds, your betting price will come in somewhere in the neighborhood of $9.20. If you drop $100 on that, your payout will be roughly $920. So again, thank you for watching Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for UFC 118, and I will see you back here for my predictions for the fight night in September.
It's getting late, I haven't seen my